Man, this has to be like one of the biggest patches ever. This is one of the biggest patches that we're going to see this year. I really doubt anything else will top this. Hello summoners and welcome back to another ProGuides patch rundown. My name is Kellen and today I'll be going over all of the changes that are going to be made in patch 10.4. As we said, this is a huge patch and there are a number of big questions being raised. Is Aphelios finally going to be gutted? Why are Zed and Talon being changed into junglers? Will Soraka top no longer be a thing? Don't worry, I'll answer all those questions in today's video, and I'll also include a tier list for each and every role that was made by our challenger analysts and partnered pro players here at ProGuides. But remember, since the patch did just hit the live servers, please do keep in mind that our tier lists are purely predictions. I want you guys to comment down below and tell me if you agree or disagree with some of these placements. And one more thing, today's question of the day is which off-meta jungler are you going to try out this patch? For me, I'm really interested in the new Talon jungle buffs, and I really can't wait to test it out. And also, before we get started, are you getting ganked in your own lane? Constantly demolished? Well, don't worry, because we've got you covered. ProGuides is the #1 proven way to quickly level up your League of Legends skills. Whether you are looking for tier lists, champion guides, coaching, or courses from your favorite pro players, ProGuides is where you'll find them. Even players like Nightblue, BunnyVufu, BoxBox, and LocoDoco support ProGuides, so what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description down below and start improving right now, and with all that being said, let's jump into the video. Very first things first, let's cover 3 new skins that'll be joining us on the Rift. Firstly, we have the Blood Moon Katarina, then Blood Moon Master Yi, and finally we have Blood Moon Tryndamere. These 3 skins look amazing and I'm 100% going to be buying them when they are released. Now, let's move on to the balance changes, and oh boy, there are a lot of them. Let's start off with items. Bomby Cinder, Sunfire Cape, and Cinderhulk have been some of the most underpowered items in the current meta. For patch 10.4, these 3 items will receive a pretty big buff, and you'll start seeing them built more often, and pretty much every single tank is going to need them. The new passive is called Immolate. Every 10 seconds, your next immobilizing spell deals 6 to 23 plus 2% of your bonus HP as damage, and then releases a Fire Nova that deals a damage around you. For Sunfire Cape, this bonus is increased to 26 to 43 plus 5%, and Cinderhulk will be 12 to 29 plus 4%. These are some massive buffs, and our analysts guarantee you that tanks are going to be a lot stronger. Having this item will mean that clearing waves and dueling your opponent will be much easier as a tank champion. However, some of the bottom tier tanks will still continue to struggle due to some mid to high tier ones being OP. Things like Ornn are going to be even stronger than they were before, so watch out for that. You might need to throw a ban his way. Next up for items, we have a nerf coming for Stopwatch. The price of this item will be increased by 50 flat gold. This is a very small nerf and it won't impact anything in the meta. People will still be buying it. Alright, now let's move into the top lane. For Jace, he's been struggling in the current meta for quite some time and is finally being buffed this patch. His Cannon Stance Q to the skies will have its base damage increased from 45 to 220 to 55 to 255. This is an okay buff to his all-in combo, but overall his stance in the meta is going to remain unaffected. He will remain in the C tier for top lane. Next up, let's talk about Gnar. He's been receiving a lot of big buffs in the past couple of months and is going to receive even more now. Firstly, his Mega Gnar movement speed will be increased by 10 flat. Next up, his ultimate will have its bonus AD ratio increased from 20% to 50%, and the AP ratio will be increased from 50 to 100%. Lastly, for his mini Gnar form, the W damage will be increased from 100 to 300 scaling to 300 flat at all ranks. These are some huge buffs for Gnar, and I'm sure it will bring him back into the meta. Having this much burst in your Mega Gnar ultimate allows you to be much stronger and much scarier. Also, he did receive that W buff, which will allow him to jungle, but the more likely scenario is that he will stick to top lane and then just clear camps when he's finished pushing. Maybe you can push in the wave and then go clear your Gromp for some extra gold, because if you're in mini Gnar, you'll do it pretty quickly. Gnar will be placed up into the A tier for this patch. Next, we have some buffs coming for Garen. Firstly, his Q will have its AD ratio increased from 40% to 50%. Next, his W will be reworked to now grant him 10% increased bonus MR and armor at max stack, and the W shield will be changed from 10% to 70 to 170 with 20% bonus HP. These are honestly some great buffs for Garen, and he'll be moved up from A into S tier for the top lane. However, one thing to note is that you'll start to have to build Black Cleaver more often now due to the tanks returning to the meta. Sona has been an extremely oppressive top laner during these patches and is being toned down in this patch of 10.14. Firstly, her Q, W, and E will all have their mana increased by 25. However, Sona will regain 30 mana if the aura from these abilities is granted to an ally. I really love this change because it not only nerfs Sona top lane, but it actually makes her slightly stronger as a support. I wish Riot would do more changes like this, especially because these support flex picks are kind of getting out of control. Sona will be completely removed from the top lane tier list because she will run out of mana way too quickly in a solo lane and will likely end the game. However, for those who do actually like to play Sona mid and have been Sona mid one tricks for a couple of seasons, I'm sorry to say, but they killed your champion. Much like Sona, Soraka top lane has been way too dominant in the recent meta. Her ability to heal, peel, and poke with just one ability made her the strongest champion in the game and is being nerfed this patch. Firstly, her base HP and HP per level and mana per level and base AD will all see adjustments. Next up, her Q Star Call will have its self-heal reduced from 60 to 140 with 50% AP ratio to 40 to 80 with a 30% ratio. In addition to that, the Rejuvenate heal will be lowered from 5 seconds to 2.5 seconds and the mana cost will be increased by 20 at all ranks. Lastly, for her Q, the bonus movement speed will be nerfed from 15 to 35% to 10 to 20%. Next up, her W Astral Infusion will have its max health cost reduced when rejuvenated by 40% to 100%. On top of that, the healing will be buffed from 80 to 200 to 80 to 220. These are some heavy nerfs for both Soraka top and support. However, they were much needed because this pick was just way too problematic, so Soraka top will be completely removed from the list in this patch. Despite Singed having a very low play rate, he's been doing very well in the recent meta and is on the strong side of the top lane spectrum. It appears that the balance team has caught onto this and are nerfing him for 10.4. First up, his base HP will be lowered from 610 to 580. In addition to that, his base armor will be lowered from 37 to 34. This is a pretty small change and likely will not impact his stance in the meta. For the actual tier list itself, it sees a lot of significant changes in this patch. Firstly, in S+ tier, we have 3 champions, which are Set, Mordekaiser, and Ornn. Ornn has been added to the S+ tier roster due to the buffs to Sunfire Cape. He was already on the brink of making the push into S+ tier, but he's now solidified himself as one of, if not the best top laner into the game due to the added burst. His damage is going to be out of control and he's going to be a must-pick or ban champion in the coming weeks. In S tier, we have a couple of new faces, which are Garen and Shen. Shen has been added to S tier due to not only the Sunfire Cape buffs, but he's also been hovering around A and S for quite a while, and our analysts can confidently say that he's officially a great pick. Sunfire Cape is always a staple item on Shen, and we'll be seeing him a lot more in 10.4 due to that buff. In A tier, we have one new pick that we'd like to talk about, which is Vayne. Vayne has been moved from the B into A tier in top lane due to the rise of these immobile tank top laners. Since Vayne can not only easily kite them, but also outscale them and actually kill them with true damage, she becomes a pretty good counter to that meta. If you get frustrated in your rank games due to these Sunfire Cape abusers of Ornn, Shen, Malphite, whoever it might be, lock in Vayne and then punish them. Alright, first up in the jungle, let's talk about some changes. We have some changes for Amumu. His Q will have its dash speed increased from 1350 to 1800. In addition to that, his ultimate will now stop dashes, and the cooldown will be reduced from 150 to 110 to 130 to 100. These are massive buffs for Amumu, and he'll be extremely effective at teamfighting and ganking. However, his early clear is still pretty rough, and he's too easily punishable at the highest level while he's clearing. However, he'll be placed in the B tier. For Rammus, he's been struggling in the meta recently and is finally being buffed for patch 10.4. His base attack speed will be increased by 5% at level 1, and his attack speed ratio will be increased by 5% as well. This is a very nice buff for him, which will allow him to clear camps much faster, so Rammus will be moved up into the jungle B tier. Finally, before we move on to those unconventional jungle buffs, we have a small change for Udyr. Taking down Cloud Drakes will now take off 5% of his global cooldown, which means that he can switch the stances faster. This is a small buff for Udyr and he'll be unmoved, but hey, if you play Udyr and you get a lot of clouds, it's pretty good. Alright, now let's move on to those unconventional junglers. The balance team has stated they want to increase the jungle pool with champions like Darius, Zed, and Talon to start jungling, so we'll run through these pretty quickly and then we'll share our thoughts shortly after. Firstly, for Darius, his bleed will now deal 120% damage to monsters, and his Q heal will now work on the jungle camps themselves. For Garen, his E will now deal 150% damage to jungle camps. Talon's passive will now work on large monsters and deal 120% damage. Zed's passive Energy Restore will now work on the jungle camps, and his passive damage to those jungle monsters will be increased by 100%. For Diana, her passive now deals 150% damage to jungle camps. For Mordekaiser, his passive will now deal 25 to 120 damage against monsters. And once again, Gnar's W will deal 300 flat damage to jungle camps instead of 100 to 300. Overall, these changes are kinda strange, but decently effective too. We are not gonna go ahead and say that 100% these champs are just going to be OP or terrible, but likely what will happen is that they'll be decent solo queue picks, but most likely terrible for competitive play. Some champions like Garen who have really weak gank potential can make up for it with a very strong clear. Other champions like Gnar might have a pretty slow Scuttle Crab but have decent ganking and a pretty good clear. We'll have to wait and see the stats, but they really will probably be around a B tier pick at best. Their updated spots in the tier list will be available in the mid-patch update, so make sure to smash that sub button to be notified of that. The jungle list sees a lot of new faces and changes in our 10.4 rundown. Firstly, in S+ tier we have the same 3 champions, which are Elise, Echo, and then the Yi and Taric funnel combo. This strategy is just ridiculously broken and elo boosters are abusing it like crazy. I've even seen account hit Masters and Grandmasters with 80% win rates, which just goes to show how freelo the combo is. Abuse it while you can because more nerfs are likely coming in the future. In S tier, we have champions like Lee Sin, Olaf, Karthus, Rek'Sai, Zac, Sej, Nunu, Shaco, and Trundle. We've had to add Nunu and Sej into S tier due to the buffs being made to Cinderhulk. Also, champions like Zac will benefit from Cinderhulk buffs, so we got a lot stronger as well. These tank junglers are going to be prominent in solo queue and competitive play, but Trundle on the other hand is the best counter to tank junglers, so if you want to pick him for Clash, he will definitely come in handy. In the B tier, we've placed most of the unconventional junglers that have been buffed this patch. For Garen specifically, if you have a Hunter's Talisman, one thing to note is that once you get 2 points in your E, either at level 3 or 4, you can start clearing the Raptor and Wolf camps very effectively with just one press of your E. This makes this clear in the mid game very strong, and it is possible that you could get quite farmed. As for Talon, if you want to clear the jungle effectively, you must manipulate the small raptors at the raptor camp with Hunter's Talisman. Throw your W at the raptor camp and kite them back, but do not kill them. Don't do raptors on your first clear, just do it to heal up. This is very similar to what Evelynn players have to do in their first clear as well, and it's a great way to make sure you stay healthy. Alright, let's run it down mid. For Sylas, he received a mini rework and he's been doing a lot better in the meta. However, he's still not as strong as he was during his prime and is being buffed in 10.4. His Q Chain Lash will have its damage increased from 40 to 100 to 40 to 120. This is a small buff and will not impact his stance in the meta, so he will remain unmoved for this list. Lux is receiving a little bit of a nice buff this patch towards her base damage and her cooldowns. Her Q will have its damage increased by 10 at all ranks, and its cooldown will be lowered by 2 seconds. This is a pretty nice buff to the early parts of her Q, starting at an 11-second cooldown, but then it scales down to its normal 9 seconds. This is a decent buff for Lux mid, but also support, so she'll be moved back into the A tier for mid lane and the support S tier. Lastly, for mid lane, we have changes coming for Aurelion Sol. Ever since his little rework, a lot of players have stopped playing him due to them not liking the changes made to him, and specifically his W feeling unintuitive and clunky. However, the players who stuck around know exactly how powerful this champion is right now, and he's receiving another nerf this patch. His W will have its active star damage increase bonus actually nerfed from 50% to 40%, and this is a pretty big nerf for A Sol since his stars are pretty much his entire source of DPS. However, he'll continue to be a pretty good solo queue pick due to his ability to roam around the map and punish mistakes, so he will remain in the mid lane A tier. The mid lane tier list does see quite a few changes for this patch. Firstly, in S+ tier, we have the same 3 champions, which are Diana, Fizz, and then the Yi Taric combo. Like we mentioned in the jungle section, this strat is super overpowered right now, and it's going to receive nerfs in the future. It honestly feels like there's nothing you can do against a hard farming Master Yi, who has a Taric to peel him and freeze waves for him. However, the combo isn't being used in competitive play because it's much easier to punish them as a well-coordinated team. One of their main strengths is abusing the lack of communication and solo queue around the map, and they get to do whatever they want. Next up in the mid lane, let's talk about S tier. Zed is being placed back into S tier due to the jungle buffs he received this patch. He will now be able to farm camps much faster, and this is going to help him out in a couple of matchups. Whenever you go missing on the map, the enemy mid laner is going to spam ping Mia on their side lanes, but you'll just be farming your raptors or even the enemy raptors or wolves. This can relieve a lot of pressure from your own side lanes, and it will help your team get lane priority on objectives. And lastly, let's finish off S tier. We have Kiana, Katarina, Echo, Cassiopeia, Kassadin, Vladimir, Talon, and Zed. Our analysts recommend that you try out Cassio this patch with Phase Rush because that rune is getting a small buff. Also, make sure you try out Talon again because he's becoming much stronger for the same reasons that we mentioned for Zed mid. And lastly, Kiana does have a niche build which involves taking Hail of Blades, which is another rune being buffed this patch, so make sure to stay tuned till the end to find out about those buffs. Alright, on to those ADCs. Firstly, for Caitlyn, she received some bug fixes which have actually impacted her stance in the meta. Being unable to headshot cancel a million times did turn out to be quite the nerf and is receiving some compensation buffs next patch. Her attack speed at level 1 will be increased from 10 to 20%. Wow, this is a huge buff for Caitlyn. She will be placed in S+ tier. Listen, I know how you're feeling. Whenever you play against Aphelios, it just feels like, I don't know what killed me. What did he do? What just happened? The visual clarity on this champion is a total mess, and the balance team are changing a few parts about him next patch. Firstly, you can now see both of his guns on his HP bar, and his turrets will have its attacks lowered from 4 to 3, the damage taken from range attacks will be increased from 2 to 3, and the turret damage taken from AoE spells will be changed from 2 to 4. Next, caliber marks will only reset 1 auto attack instead of a guaranteed 2 AA resets. Lastly, his ultimate had its range lowered from 1600 to 1300. Aphelios will be dropped down into S tier from the S+ tier, but it's a pretty good chance that he will make the push back into S+ tier in our mid-patch update. Everybody hates this champion. Everybody hates playing against it for a reason. It's just so hard to see what happened. I don't know why this champion was ever made or ever designed, and I feel bad for Aphelios mains, but I gotta say, this champ's broken. The ADC list still feels very similar to the one that we had previously, only with some minor changes. In S tier, we have 3 members, which are Senna, Misfortune, and Caitlyn. These 3 champs are the strongest ADCs in the game right now and will bring you the best results in solo queue. In S tier, we have Vayne, Ezreal, Lucian, Jinx, and Aphelios. These champions also do pretty well in the meta, and especially for Vayne because of the tanks coming back, it means that it's actually not so bad. A notable change for ADCs is Kalista making a jump and rending her way from D tier into B tier. Recently, her win rate has skyrocketed from around the low 40s, where it usually sits near the dead champion territory, hello Akali, to around a 53% win rate right now. This is mainly due to a return of tanks in the meta, which makes Kalista a pretty good counter. Kalista can kite tanks ridiculously well, which will allow her to become a relevant ADC once again. Even pro players are picking her for competitive play, so she's going to be a lot more popular this patch. Alright, now let's move on to the support list because there are no balance changes directly for supports this patch, other than Lux being buffed, which we already talked about. The support list sees a couple of changes in our 10.4 rundown. In S tier, we have 1 new member, which is Lux. The Aftershock Lux support build is probably going to make a comeback in the meta because of the buff she received on her Q. Those 2 changes are pretty much the reason why she was ever a support to begin with, and it's much better for her as a support than a mid laner. Soraka's been dropped down from support S tier into A tier due to the overall massive nerfs she received for the top lane. These nerfs are heavy hits for her, but she did get compensated with a couple of those buffs for W. It's not all that bad. However, her presence as a lane bully has been heavily affected, and you're probably really going to be able to feel those nerfs during the laning phase. I myself wouldn't even be surprised if she has to drop all the way down to B, C, or maybe even D tier just because those laning phase nerfs. In S+ tier, we still have the League of meta tanks, which are Leona, Nautilus, and Blitzcrank. These 3 champions are dominating the support meta, and you should pick them whenever you can. Our analysts highly recommend Leona and Nautilus specifically because they're just so easy to play, have high damage, insane lockdown, and can solo carry games. And Riot has proven, despite the fact that both these champions in the last 6 months have been the best supports in the game, they still have not been nerfed that hard. That's it for the supports. Let's quickly talk about runes and summoner spells. Perfect timing has been way too dominant among support players recently, and it's being nerfed for 10.4. The time you get to receive the stopwatch has been increased from 10 minutes to 14 minutes, however, you'll get it reduced by 2 minutes for each takedown. In addition to that, the stopwatch will now no longer reduce the cooldown of actives, which are Stoneplate, Zhonya's, and GA, etc, etc. Honestly, this rune will still be broken if you continue to see it used, and it will still be on the Rift, especially if you get some early kills. Exhaust has also been heavily overshadowed by Ignite in the current meta, and pretty much nobody takes Exhaust on any support, any mid laner, anything like that. So it's being buffed. The duration of the summer spell will now be increased from 2.5 seconds to 3 seconds. Although half a second of Exhaust doesn't seem like much, it's actually a pretty big buff, so you'll start to see it being used pretty often, and if you ever run into a Vayne, a Kalista, or any kind of ADC like that, go ahead and start taking Exhaust into them, it's really good. Phase Rush will have its time window in between attacks increased from 3 seconds to 4 seconds. In addition to that, the movement speed it grants for melee champions will be buffed from 25% to 40% to 30 to 50%. I know Phase Rush Darius used to be a very popular pick, and I'm sure it will make a comeback for Jungle Darius in the coming patches. Hail of Blades will have its time window between attacks increased from 2 seconds to 3 seconds. The cooldown, however, will be nerfed from 4 seconds out of combat to 8 seconds, in or out of combat. Although the cooldown is much longer, it's actually a net buff towards the rune overall. Having that extra second for your attacks is great for in-lane trading, and those Yasuo top mains might actually get a rune that could work for them. Lastly, the legend runes are some of the strongest runes in the game right now and are being nerfed this patch. The stacking on minions that it will grant will now only grant 4 stacks instead of 5. This is just a tiny nerf and these runes are still super strong, but hey, it'll be tuned down just a little bit. That's going to be it for our 10.4 rundown video. If you enjoyed watching this, then please leave a like, comment, and subscribe to our channel down below to be notified of our next video. Also, make sure to check out ProGuides.com for in-depth content and guides that were made by your favorite pro players. The second part of our meta-analysis video will be available next week, which will bring you the most accurate tier list available using fresh stats. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the Rift.